Live from the Stability and Trim for the Ship's Officers podcast studio, where the vessel's its own best instrument of stability and trim. Welcome. This is William George. This is podcast 12, chapter 7, Stability at Large Angles of Inclination, and the book is from Stability and Trim for the Ship's Officer. In the past, the stability of merchant ships at large angles of inclination was not a matter of routine concern to most ship's officers, for two reasons. One, the inclination due to list, not rolls, were very rarely occurring over 10 degrees, and two, the officers had insufficient data available to do stability calculations at large angles of heel. Today it's impossible to provide the officers with information and tools to do stability calculations at large angles of heels for the following purposes: to prove compliance with various stability criteria, to determine the list when a vessel is engaged in a heavy lift operation, and to evaluate damaged conditions due to flooding and mismanagement of the ship's cargo tanks or shifting cargo. So at this point, one thing I'd like to point out is most of the stability game for ships is played less than 10 degrees. And what's interesting is most ships officers and masters don't realize is you most likely at a list of 18 degrees or more will lose your main engine and the ship will go dead in the water. A steamship with water in the boilers, I've been told it'll be 21 degrees when you lose the boiler of the plant. So, again, lifeboats on the high side are designed to launch at a 15-degree adverse angle of list, and no rolling is really ever considered. All these calculations are done in still water, just like in a harbor condition. The effect of GM. When we talk about stability of large angles of heel, the true measurement, whether it's small or large angles of heel, is righting moment. And for large angles of heel, instead of GM, which is only accurate up to 8 to 10 degrees because the meta center moves off the center line as the vessel heels, we use the initial slope of the stability curve is based on righting arm, and the relationship is GM times the sine of the angle of heel. And that comes from the wall-sided formula. But basically, for the first up to 0 to 8 or 10 degrees, you can approximate a stability curve by simply knowing the GM and applying the sine of the angle of heel to it. So it's GM times the sine of the angle of heel equals the righting arm. Now the reason we use the righting arm is because when the vessel heels over, the weight of the vessel is considered constant, and the righting moment would be the righting arm GZ times the displacement, which gives you the righting moment. So basically by just addressing GZ, we can use much smaller numbers than taking a righting arm of 0.75 meters times a displacement in 95,000 tons. It's easier just to use the righting arm because the numbers are smaller. And if we use righting arms, then for vertical corrections of the center of gravity, up or down, we use sine correction. For the shift in G up, it would be a negative correction. For the shift in G down, it would be a positive sign correction to the original assumed righting arms at the assumed kg that you're given. So to draw a stability curve, first we need to go to the cross curves of stability. And the cross curves of stability are shown in figure 7-2. And this is the traditional picture out of the Stability Data Reference Guide for the license exam. And you would pick the displacement such as 10,000 tons, go vertically up. At each slide, there's a curve for 15 degrees, 30, 45, 60, 75, and 90 degrees. And you would pick off the writing arms for those inclinations, and then note that the assumed kg in figure 7-2 on page 130 is 20 feet. On figure 7-3, there's a different format for the same data, and it would be a more modern digital format where the displacement is listed on the right-hand column. The angle of heels from 5-degree increments basically go across the top, and you can just interpolate for the exact value if you want it. Now, once you get those values, and let's go back to figure 7-2 for the 10,000 ton displacement, you can go to the next page, 131, and use figure 7-4, and you can plot those same values right from 0 to 90 degrees, and you'll see the 10,000 ton curve, displacement stability curve, and that is for the assumed kg at 20 feet. So that's how you construct your initial curve, but then you have to correct it to the actual vertical shift in the center of gravity. So if you know the kg of the vessel, the difference between the assumed kg and the actual kg is the sign correction you're going to apply to that. And this is construction of the curve is shown on figure 7-5 on page 134. And first it shows the initial construction of the initial slope of the curve based on GM and A, and B, it shows plotting the writing arms, as I said before. And then C, it's drawing the sign correction, and in this case it would be for a vertical shift of 3 feet, and the actual kg would be 23 feet. And the sign correction is plotted on top of the stability curve, and the crosshatch area is the writing arms remaining. Well, then with a pair of dividers, you can actually scale the writing arm height to the next curve, D, and that shows you the actual stability curve for the displacement at 10,000 tons and the kg at 20 feet. Now, what's important to remember is always label your curve, the displacement as well as the kg, so you know what you're looking at. Okay, then if we go a little bit farther in the book, what happens when we have an off-center weight? And if we go to page 139 and figure 7-9, you can see with a positive GM, the initial slope is always positive, but now we'll have a cosine correction from 0 to 90 degrees, and that would be the reduction in stability due to an off-center weight. And in this case, what do we say? The correction GG prime times the cosine of the angle of heel is gradually lessens because the vertical lines of G and G prime come in progressively closer, and that's why we use a cosine correction. But it looks like here the shift in G would be about 0.7 feet off the center line, and it would be it would be applied as a cosine correction. The maximum value is at 0 degrees. The minimum 0 value would be at 90. So what you need to know for sine, the value of 0 is 0. For 30 degrees, the sine value is 0.5. For 60 degrees, it's 0.87. And for 90 degrees, it's 1.0. 1. Now, the cosine is the opposite. So the cosine at 0 degrees is 1. At 30 degrees, it's 0.87. At 60 degrees, it's 0.5. And the cosine of 90 is 0. So that's when you see this figure 7-9 on page 139, they're plotting this cosine correction. Now the original curve needs to be drawn for the displacement and corrected for the actual kg. And now if there's an off-center weight, we're plotting the cosine correction. Now, where the cosine correction intersects the stability curve, corrected for the actual kg. That's your angle of list. And if we go to page 140, we draw the cosine correction for a 4-foot transverse shift in the center of gravity. You can see the remaining stability, and the angle of heel will be all a little bit less than 30 degrees. And then at the second part of figure 7-10, you'll see the stability curve actually drawn with the remaining stability. And again, I tell you to take your dividers and walk through it and step your way through it, and you'll see actually where the numbers are leading you to draw these curves. Now on 7-11 on page 141, that curve shows original displacement of 8,000 tons in a kg at 20 feet, and then it shows the sine correction for a kg at 24 feet, and a cosine correction on top of the sine correction for a transverse shift of 1.45 feet. And quickly you can see the range of stability. At this case, it would be about 22 degrees would be the angle of list, and about 75 degrees when the vessel would capsize. And that would be in still water without waves again. So, and page 142, we're talking about the typical stability curves for a freighter, a tanker, and a passenger ship. And you can see that they are a little bit different. If you think about a flat bottom wide barge, square barge, the curve basically is a big inverted U-shaped curve that goes almost straight up and straight down, and its overall range of stability isn't that big. If we look at page 144, again we're showing a cosine correction where all the writing arms are used up because the cosine correction is equal to the maximum writing arm, and that vessel will just capsize. So that's about what we're talking about on this chapter. It's kind of hard to do it with the podcast just because of the drawings. This is a graphical chapter. A lot of the calculations are basically simple, but it helps to actually have the pictures and draw the graphs. There is one other thing, and it's the angle of down flooding. And even though your stability curve shows, this is on page 154 on figure 720, even though your stability curve shows you have positive stability past the angle of down flooding, if you start to down flood, you're going to down flood, and the progressive flooding will start, and the vessel will sink. And that's about all we have time for today on this. And it's about as good as we can do because it's really a graphical chapter. So until next time, I wish you all well, and thanks a lot. And just as a reminder, our Advanced Stability course at MyTags West went very well this last week. And the next one will be July 20th to 24th in Seattle. And I'll be teaching that one also. Everybody seemed to have a good time, and everybody passed the course. So I look forward to meeting you there again. And if you have any questions, you can always send me an email, williamegeorge@gmail.com. Thank you.